again, everybody. Rodger Duckworth here. So I had some thoughts about addiction and putting together a little video on addiction and how my work might overlap into the world of addiction. So today I want to look at addiction, a new paradigm maybe about a new way of looking at addiction management, which, you know, is a very tricky area and traditionally around the world is not managed well. So addiction, well, what is addiction? It's an excessive compulsion to do something. It has changes within the neuronal system within the brain, and this is part of what makes the addiction in and of itself a self-driving force. But if we go back to maybe why somebody uses that addiction habit or creates the addiction in the first place, then this might give us some clues as to how we need to approach this matter differently. Gabor Mate, a big author in this field who has a great deal of experience as an addiction expert from Vancouver, he says, you know, we must stop asking why the addiction and ask why the pain. Okay, now, well, pain. Okay, because I don't have pain. Okay, why the inability to cope with the overwhelming emotion? Oh, well, and if somebody says they don't have pain, I'm going, well, okay, so maybe you don't now, but at one point you did, and maybe now you're dissociating from that, and there's the point. But if the sensation that we experience associated with loneliness or a sense of shame, we can sometimes even get that discombobulated. We can get that mixed up because if you, from an early age, you don't really associate those sensations with shame anymore because you've disconnected with it to cope. But if that sensation comes up, then it can lead to messages in the nervous system that go, okay, here's that sensation. That's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be too much for me to cope with because I don't know how to cope with this on my own. And so what do I do to get that horrible sensation to go away? So let's say, for example, you know, you're feeling terribly lonely, or you're feeling really unseen, you know, or hurt in some way by somebody that we care about. If that brings up the sensations in the body, then if that's too much, what are we going to do with it? Well, we've got to cope. And if we can't cope, one thing that we might do is use a substance. We might say, I need to have a drink because I'm just really wound up, or I'm really hurt and I need to soothe myself, and I might soothe myself using a substance. Now, of course, that could be any kind of substance, and there's all sorts of things that we can do to soothe ourselves. We can use smoking to calm the nervous system. We can use alcohol. We might use some kind of illicit drug or recreational drug. We might use sex. We might use exercise. There's all sorts of things. We might have sugar, and we might eat, comfort eating. There's lots of things which one might argue are often healthy things. There's nothing wrong with eating. There's nothing wrong with having sex. You know, there's nothing wrong probably with a glass of wine. But when we use these things to excess, then it tends to create an association, very, very strong association in the nervous system that then that goes, okay, when we experience this feeling, this is what we have to do to get rid of it. Okay, we have to use this to cope because we don't have any other way. Then what can happen is that we get this really strong firing of neurons, and through neuroplasticity, we actually set up new neuronal pathways within the brain, so that when we experience that sensation, very quickly it goes to, well, that now gives me a craving for something like alcohol or tobacco or an illicit drug, because I know, through the nervous system knows through experience, that's what shuts down that pain. And of course there are cognitive associations with that. So that sensation in the body will lead to thought. I was working with a patient this morning and she was saying, every time I get that feeling, that then causes me to actually blame myself, and I have all sorts of self-blame going on in my head when I feel this feeling over here in my body. That's linked itself up. So then when we can learn to regulate and change those pains and sensations in the body in a different way, we can begin to unwire. Now, I am a firm believer that if you don't learn to process the felt sense of emotions and to regulate your nervous system better than you do, you'll never beat addiction. And I have a number of patients who I work with who, because of the nature of their chronic pain, they might also have a history of eating disorders, they might also have a history of drug or alcohol addiction, sexual addiction. There's lots of different elements that people bring when they're coming to me with complex chronic health problems, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, ME, etc. These things all go together, even long COVID. So for me, it's really, really important to help people to process the feelings and the emotions better, because without it, that pathway and that link, you're probably never going to break. And it's a really missing piece of managing addiction. I don't think people until of late have really thought about, what do you kind of replace that addiction with? What do you do? You can't just say to somebody, okay, well, I'll tell you what you do. You're just going to go cold turkey. You're not going to actually have that thing. Well, wow. I mean, people do, and people amazingly do well with that. But I think in conjunction to supporting that and helping better outcomes for addiction might be if we were able to help them find an alternative way of managing that sensation that comes up and the cognitive processes that come up, then that's going to really support any other kind of addiction recovery process that they might be going through. So I do think it's really vital that we start to tackle the feelings and sensations in the body and a somatic experience and reprocessing in order to tackle addiction and get much, much better outcomes from addiction recovery programs. Another thing worth talking about is social engagement and some real shifts in community and cultural habits which really don't help a lot of addiction. There are huge social stigmas against addiction, which then just feed into most people who are addicts actually feel they don't like themselves very much. Usually they already coming up against senses of blame, shame, inadequacy, all sorts of things on a daily basis, which often causes them the pain, and around they go in the cycle of substance use or other addictive behaviors. And the more that culturally and socially they're ostracized, the worse this is going to get. In Portugal, they're really trying to shift to allow communities to support addiction in a different way, employers to support addiction in a different way through education and understanding. It's really important that addicts have access, I think, to a community of people, not just other addicts, although they're phenomenally supportive and compassionate and understanding. I do think, even if we are thinking about the other aspects of social engagement in terms of the nervous system and addiction, and how neurons of one person can affect the neurons of another person in their proximity. It's good to have the empathy of being in addiction support groups with other addicts, but what you are dealing with, of course, is a bunch of people who also can't regulate their own nervous system very well. So for them to be able to get out into communities who maybe were more compassionate, maybe more empathic and understanding, but also in a place where they actually have a different state of their own nervous system that's going to be shaping the nervous system of the patient, if you will, and the addict. And so I do think that we really need to look in terms of healthcare. We've got a social healthcare system that needs to really be revised. But my little piece of the jigsaw in all of that lot is maybe helping people with addiction who often have chronic pain as well, to learn about their own felt sense, learn about their own nervous system, learn about how the altered belief systems might be coupled up and linked in with those abnormal nervous system processing, and help them to retrain that. And I have a number of patients I'm treating with addictions right now, and I had a lovely chap say, you know, you might be the first person that I've ever met who really understands addiction. And that really moved my heart when he said that. And I'm proud to say that he is really making great strides, and his partner said, you know, he's made more progress doing this work than he has done for years. So there is hope, and I hope this is of some kind of use to anybody listening to it, that it resonates with. Thanks for your time.